August 29, 1944. A temporary U.S. Army stockade somewhere in the rolling fields west of Chartres, France. Rain falls in a fine, persistent mist, turning the churned earth of the compound into a slick, ankle-deep porridge of mud. The air is thick with the scent of wet wool, diesel fumes, and the sharp, chemical bite of lye thrown down to keep the sickness at bay. For Private First Class Frank Miller, 19th Infantry Regiment, this smell is the smell of the war's unglamorous backside. He fought his way off Omaha Beach, bled in the hedgerows of Normandy, and now, his war has become this: 4 posts, 3 strands of barbed wire, and a collection of ghosts. His M1 Garand is slung over his shoulder, the stock slick with rain. He stands on the duckboards of the guard tower, a flimsy platform of scavenged lumber, and watches the wire. Below, the prisoners huddle under dripping canvases, their faces pale and anonymous in the gray light. They are the leftovers of liberation. Old men with watery eyes accused of selling produce to the Germans, wiry young men with street fight scars who served in the collaborationist milice, and a handful of women whose crimes are whispered with a particular kind of venom. They are a flock of crows in a cage, cawing and pecking at the scraps of a world that no longer wants them. The sound of grinding gears cuts through the hiss of the rain. A deuce-and-a-half truck, its canvas top dark and heavy with water, groans to a halt outside the main gate. The tailgate slams down with a metallic crash. Sergeant McRae, a man from Tennessee whose face seems permanently carved into a scowl, barks an order. "New fish, Miller. Keep your eyes peeled." Frank nods, shifting his weight. His feet are perpetually damp, perpetually cold. He watches as the MPs shove the new arrivals out of the back of the truck. They stumble into the mud, a pathetic procession of shame. 2 men in threadbare suits, their hands bound with zip ties. Another, a farmer by the looks of his rough hands and sun-beaten neck, blinking in confusion. And then, her. She is the last one off the truck, nudged forward by a corporal. You see the others first as a group, a faceless problem to be managed. But you see her as an individual, and that's what makes your gut tighten. Her head has been shaved. Not neatly, but hacked away in ragged patches, the scalp showing white and vulnerable beneath the stubble. The act was meant to strip her of her femininity, to brand her as a tondu, a woman who lay with the enemy. It has succeeded only in making her look like a terrified child. Her dress, once perhaps a pretty floral print, is torn at the shoulder and smeared with mud from the truck bed. She can't be more than 20. She keeps her eyes fixed on the ground, on the impossible task of keeping her worn leather shoes from being swallowed by the mud. She doesn't cry. She doesn't protest. She just moves, a small, automaton-like figure propelled by the grim logic of her situation. Frank has seen death. He has seen men torn apart by machine gun fire and artillery. He has grown a hard callus around his heart to survive it. But this is different. This isn't the clean violence of the front line, it's the messy, intimate cruelty of its aftermath. He watches as she's processed her name taken down on a clipboard by a clerk who doesn't look at her face. Elise Dubois. The charge, collaboration horizontale. Liaison with an officer of the Sicherheitsdienst. The Gestapo. The name hangs in the air, ugly and heavy. She is shoved into the women's section of the compound, a small pen separated from the main population by another strand of wire. There are only 4 other women there, older and harder looking. They watch her arrival with predatory stillness. They don't offer a hand, or a word of comfort. They simply make room, their silence a judgment of its own. Elise finds a spot against the fence, sinks down onto her haunches, and wraps her thin arms around her knees, finally invisible against the gray canvas and the gray sky. Frank Miller looks away, back toward the perimeter wire, trying to force the image from his mind. But he can't. He has a sister back in Dayton, Ohio, about the same age. For the first time since landing in France, he feels a tremor of something more complicated than fear or anger. It is a profound and unsettling unease. The rain keeps falling. The day is not yet over. The days that follow bleed into one another, each one a copy of the last, painted in shades of gray and brown. The routine of the stockade is a rhythm of monotonous misery. The pre-dawn chill, the clang of the mess kits, the watery coffee that tastes of burnt chicory. Then the long, empty hours of waiting. The prisoners shuffle and pace, their movements circumscribed by the wire. They argue in low, guttural French. They stare at the guards with a mixture of hatred, fear, and desperate, calculating hope. For PFC Frank Miller, his world has shrunk to this 300-yard perimeter. His job is to watch, to exist as a symbol of the power that has caged these people. He begins to notice the small details, the unspoken language of the compound. He learns to distinguish the sound of a real fight from a spat over a cigarette butt. He can tell by the way a man stands whether he has given up or is still plotting. And he watches Elise Dubois. She is a study in silence. While the other women in her pen form a bitter clique, sharing rumors and complaints, Elise remains apart. She never begs for extra rations. She never screams at the guards. She never cries where anyone can see. Each morning, she performs a small, defiant ritual. She takes her daily canteen of water, and before drinking, she pours a little into her cupped hands and washes her face, carefully, methodically. She uses a scrap of her torn dress to dry it. Then, she attempts to smooth her ragged, boyish hair. It is a useless gesture, but she performs it with the solemnity of a prayer. In the afternoon, if the sun breaks through the clouds, she will sit and pick the burrs and mud from the hem of her dress. She folds her single, threadbare blanket into a neat square every morning, placing it at the head of her small patch of ground as if it were a pillow in a real bed. Frank finds himself watching for these rituals. They are the only things that seem to have order in this chaotic place. The other guards, men like McRae, see her as just another collaborator, a crowd whore. They make crude jokes when they walk past her pen. "Hey, Fräulein, miss your boyfriend." Frank clenches his jaw and says nothing. He knows it's easier for them to see her that way. It's easier to reduce her to a crime, to a label. It makes the job of guarding her, of pointing a rifle in her direction, simpler. But Frank can't do it. He sees the tremor in her hands when a truck backfires. He sees the way her eyes dart to the gate whenever it opens, a flicker of hope and terror. He sees a young woman who is utterly, terrifyingly alone. One evening, during the distribution of rations, a lump of greasy stew and a hard biscuit, Frank is on duty near the women's pen. A corporal shoves the tin plates through the gap under the wire. One of the older women, a hawk-faced woman named Yvette, snatches Elise's plate before she can reach it, snarling something in French. Elise doesn't fight back. She simply straightens up and turns away, her face a mask of weary resignation. Frank feels a hot surge of anger. He takes a step forward, his hand on the stock of his rifle. "Hey! Give that back," he yells. Yvette glares at him, spits on the ground, but shoves the plate back toward Elise. Elise looks up, not at the other woman, but at Frank. Her eyes meet his for just a second. There is no gratitude in her gaze. There is nothing. It's as if she is looking straight through him. The emptiness in that look is more disturbing than any scream. He realizes with a jolt that in her world, he is no different from the woman who stole her food. He is just another part of the cage. He is a uniform, a rifle, a pair of boots in the mud. He is one of the men who holds the keys. The brief connection is severed, and she retreats back into her silence, leaving Frank standing in the growing dusk, the weight of his weapon feeling heavier than ever before. The 4th day of September brings a change. The sky clears, but the mood in the stockade grows darker. During the night, a prisoner from the men's side, a former milice officer, managed to cut a hole in the wire and slip away into the darkness. The escape sends a ripple of fury through the camp's small command structure. Captain Davies, the company commander, is a man aged beyond his 30 years by the campaigns in North Africa and Italy. He sees the escape not just as a failure of security, but as a personal insult. He calls Sergeant McRae and the other NCOs to his tent, and the shouting can be heard clear across the compound. The result is a new set of orders, passed down with grim efficiency. Effective immediately, McRae announces, his voice flat and hard, all high-risk prisoners will be secured in leg irons from sundown to sunup. No exceptions. A murmur runs through the ranks of the guards. Leg irons. It feels like something from another century. This isn't a POW camp for German soldiers, it's a holding pen. But the order is the order. High risk is defined as anyone with a history of violence, known political connections, or those whose alleged crimes are deemed particularly egregious. Frank Miller's stomach churns. He knows, instinctively, who will be on that list. Later that afternoon, he sees the clerk walking through the compound with McRae, a clipboard in his hand, pointing out the prisoners who will be shackled. He points to the ringleader of a black market gang. He points to the hulking farmer who'd tried to fight the MPs during his arrest. And then, he stops before the women's pen. His finger hesitates, then points directly at Elise Dubois. Frank feels a cold knot tighten in his gut. Her, he hears another guard mutter. She weighs 90 pounds soaking wet. McRae just grunts. Charge is sleeping with a Gestapo Hauptsturmführer. Captain wants to make an example. Says she probably knows things. Flight risk. The logic is brutal and absolute. Her alleged intimacy with the enemy has made her more dangerous in their eyes than any of the common thugs. She is not just a collaborator, she is a traitor in the most profound sense, and she will be treated as such. As dusk settles over the camp, the detail is formed. Frank is part of it. They carry the irons in canvas bags, heavy, cast iron cuffs connected by a 2-foot length of chain. They smell of rust and cold metal. The sound they make, clanking against each other, is a dead, final sound. The prisoners watch in stony silence as the guards move through the compound, singling out the condemned. Men fight, curse, and have to be subdued. It's a grim, ugly business. Then, they reach the women's pen. The other women shrink away from Elise as if she is diseased. McRae unlocks the gate and gestures with his chin. Miller. You do it? Frank hesitates. Every instinct screams at him to refuse, to say it's not his job. But in the army, you don't refuse an order from a sergeant. Not unless you want to be on the other side of the wire yourself. He ducks into the pen, the heavy irons cold in his hand. Elise is on her feet, backed against the fence post, her eyes wide. For the first time, Frank sees raw, undiluted terror in her face. She is trembling, not violently, but with a fine, deep shudder that seems to rack her entire body. He kneels in the mud in front of a person he is supposed to be protecting, a French civilian. I'm sorry, he whispers, the words feeling hollow and useless. He avoids her eyes, fumbling with the lock on the first cuff. Her ankle is impossibly thin. The iron encircles it with a cold, metallic snap. He reaches for the other one. She doesn't resist. She doesn't make a sound. She just stands there, rigid, as he locks the second cuff. The chain pools in the mud between her feet. When he stands up and backs away, the sound follows him. It is the soft, dragging scrape of iron on wet earth. It's the sound of the last piece of her dignity being stripped away and left to rust in the French mud. 2 nights pass. The chains become part of the soundscape of the stockade, a new layer in its symphony of despair. At night, you can hear the soft clinking and dragging as the shackled prisoners shift in their sleep or move to the latrine buckets. It is a constant, subtle reminder of their status. For Frank Miller, the sound is a personal rebuke. Each time he hears it from the women's pen, he sees Elise's face in that moment, the sheer terror in her eyes as the cold iron closed around her ankle. He does his job. He walks his post. He reports when his shift is over. But the machinery of it all, the casual cruelty he is now a part of, has begun to grind him down. On the 3rd night, he has the midnight to 4 watch. The camp is quieter than usual. A low-hanging fog has rolled in, muffling sound and turning the guard tower lights into hazy, indistinct halos. The air is cold and damp, a chill that seeps into your bones. Most of the prisoners are asleep, huddled shapes under thin blankets. Frank walks the perimeter, his boots making soft, sucking sounds in the mud. As he passes the women's pen, he sees a figure standing by the wire. It's Elise. She hasn't been sleeping. She has been standing there, perfectly still, for over an hour. Her rations from the evening meal sit untouched beside her, the stew congealed in its tin plate. She is staring out, not at him, but through the wire into the formless gray fog beyond. As he gets closer, she turns her head. In the dim, diffused light, her face is a pale oval, her eyes dark, sunken pits of exhaustion. He expects her to turn away, to retreat back into her protective silence. But she doesn't. She speaks. Her voice is a dry whisper, so quiet he has to strain to hear it over the dripping of water from a canvas tarp. Her English is heavily accented, fractured, the words chosen with a painful delicacy. "Soldier," she begins, her hands gripping the wire. He stops. His training tells him not to engage, to keep moving. His humanity holds him in place. "Yes," he replies, his own voice sounding too loud in the stillness. She doesn't ask for food. She doesn't ask for a blanket, or for news of the war. She doesn't proclaim her innocence. She says nothing of what he expects. Her eyes drop to the ground, to the chain that connects her ankles. "Please," she whispers, and the word is freighted with a weight that seems to bend the very air around them. "Please, no more chains." He says nothing, waiting. She struggles to find the words, her brow furrowed in concentration. The shaved head. "I understand." The hunger. "I understand." The cage. "I understand." Each phrase is a confession of acceptance, a catalogue of the humiliations she has endured and rationalized as the price of her choices, or her survival. She looks up at him then, and for the first time, he sees not a prisoner, but the full, devastating depth of her despair. Tears well in her eyes but do not fall. "But this," she says, her voice cracking as she nudges the chain with the toe of her shoe. "This is for an animal. Not a person. They do not do this to the German soldiers. They do not do this to the men who fought. They do this to me." Her logic is simple and unassailable. The chains are not for security. They are a special kind of punishment, a declaration that she is something less than human. I cannot be an animal." She looks down at her untouched food. "I will not eat. Not with this. Please, soldier. No more chains." The plea hangs between them, stark and absolute. It is not a request, it is an ultimatum delivered from a position of complete powerlessness. She is offering the only thing she has left to control, her own life. She would rather starve to death as a human being than live for one more day as a chained animal. Frank stands frozen, the cold of the fog and the cold of her words seeping into him. He is a 19-year-old kid from Ohio with a rifle and a set of orders. He is supposed to be a liberator. And a young woman, not much older than him, is begging him not for her freedom, but for the simple dignity of being unchained while she waits for her judgment. The fog swirls around them, and in the profound silence of the night, Frank Miller is faced with a choice that has no right answer. Her words linger long after she has retreated from the wire, sinking back into the shadows of the pen. "Please, no more chains." It's a simple sentence, but it has reconfigured Frank Miller's world. He finishes his watch in a daze, the familiar routine of walking the perimeter now feeling alien and strange. The stock of his M1 feels heavier, the wire of the cage seems taller, and the faces of the sleeping prisoners look less like collaborators and criminals and more like a collection of broken human beings. He is no longer just a guard. He is a jailer. He is the man with the keys. Her plea has made his role personal, stripping away the comfortable anonymity of the uniform. When his replacement arrives, Frank trudges back to the barracks tent. He can't sleep. He lies on his cot, staring up at the canvas ceiling, the scent of damp wool and stale cigarette smoke filling his nostrils. He thinks about the newsreels they were shown before shipping out. The ones about liberating Europe from tyranny, about freeing people from chains, both literal and figurative. He remembers the cheering crowds in the first French villages they entered, the flowers, the wine, the girls kissing them. It had felt so simple then. They were the good guys. The heroes. Now, he's putting a starving girl in leg irons because she fell in love with the wrong man in the middle of a war. He thinks about the consequences. If he's caught helping her, disobeying a direct order from Sergeant McRae in a forward operating area, it could mean a court-martial. It could mean being sent to a punishment battalion, or worse. All for a French girl who probably did sleep with the enemy. McRae's voice echoes in his head, she bailing. Did they put the chains on her? Did his words to her, his simple "I'm sorry," mean nothing? Later that night, long after midnight, Frank leaves his tent. He tells the fire watcher he needs some air. He walks to the edge of the compound, to a spot where he can see the women's pen without being obvious. It is a clear night, the moon a silver sliver in the sky. He watches for a long time. He sees her, a silhouette against the canvas. She is sitting, not standing. And then, she moves. She stands up and walks, slowly, a few paces to the left, then a few paces to the right. She is pacing. Freely. There is no telltale clink of iron. There is no dragging sound. The chains are off. He doesn't know how or why. Maybe the captain had a change of heart. Maybe a sympathetic medic intervened. Or maybe, just maybe, one of the guards on that detail, a man whose name Frank might never know, looked into her eyes and decided, for one night at least, to fail in his duty. To commit a small, silent act of what she was doing. They all did. You feel sorry for them, you end up with a knife in your back. Maybe he was right. Maybe sentiment was a luxury you couldn't afford here. But then he remembers her face. The quiet dignity of her morning rituals. The utter void in her eyes when the other woman stole her food. And the raw, desperate plea in the fog. It wasn't manipulative. It wasn't a trick. It was the sound of a human spirit at the absolute edge of its endurance. She wasn't fighting the cage anymore, she was fighting the definition of what she was inside it. And he, Frank Miller, was the one enforcing that definition every time he walked his post. The next evening, Frank is not on guard duty. He is assigned to the supply tent. But he watches the shackling detail from a distance as dusk falls. He sees McRae and two other guards head for the women's pen. He sees them unlock the gate. His heart hammers against his ribs. He watches Elise, who stands waiting, her untouched food from the night before still beside her. He sees her flinch as the guards approach. He sees them bend down. And then, he sees them stand up and walk away, locking the gate behind them. From this distance, he can't be sure. The light is rebellion against the crushing logic of the war. Frank looks up at the moon, then back at the girl pacing in the cage. He knows nothing has really changed. She is still a prisoner. Her fate is still uncertain. But tonight, she is not an animal. A small measure of humanity has been restored in the mud and the wire. And for Frank Miller, that single, silent victory feels more important, more meaningful, than any battle he has yet fought. The echo of her plea remains, a permanent part of the war he will carry home.